Hello, and welcome back to Patient Conversations with Leah. I'm Leah Phillips here with Young Lung Cancer Initiative, and I have my friend Cori here, who is going to be our guest for the next 3 episodes. She's here to share a little bit about her journey over the last 9 years. You heard me right, 9 years as a young lung cancer patient. She was diagnosed almost 9 years ago as stage 1B, and then as her journey has gone on, she has progressed to stage 4. So I'm going to turn it over to Cori and let her share a little bit about her journey.
Everyone. So I am a long-term survivor, which is feels weird to say. I never thought I'd get here, but I was first diagnosed. I think I may have done the math wrong. I think it was actually maybe more than 10 years ago. Everything gets blurry, but over 10 years ago, I had an upper left lobectomy and 12 lymph nodes removed, and they thought I was cured. Unfortunately, lung cancer is very tenacious, and it came back a year and a half later. So at age 32, a week before my 33rd birthday, I became stage 4, which was very devastating for me because I already knew all the facts about lung cancer because I had already been stage 1 before. So after that, I enrolled in a clinical trial, which I believe is why I'm still here, and I'm doing great on it.
That's just amazing. It's so hopeful for all of us. I feel like a lot of times I'm the one that's the long time survivor when I'm talking to people because it's been 5 years. And so to hear 10 years, that just is just inspiring on it, just in and of itself. But when I hear you talk about 10 years and being a young lung cancer patient, 10 years to get a clinical trial, you said 18 months later, this comes back. So you've been basically on your clinical trial for 8.5 years.
Yes.
And that is amazing and really not heard of very often. So I'm sure when people hear this is going to inspire people to be more open to clinical trials. I think there's a lot of misconception that a clinical trial is your last ditch effort.
Yes.
And obviously, in your case, it was not. You probably, I don't know, you'll have to explain, but if you had other options. So I'm
Mhm.
thinking that the viewers would really like to know how you came to the decision to try a clinical trial at such an early stage of the game, I guess, into your diagnosis.
So I was very lucky that I had moved my care up to USC in Southern California. I previously, when I was stage 1, I received very bad care. Even in Southern California, it's one of the best places in the entire world to get sick. There's a million hospitals, a million great doctors, and I still was misdiagnosed forever and received very poor care. And my sister found a doctor up at USC who specialized in young lung cancer and was doing a study about it, Dr. Gitlitz, and moved me up there. And so after when the cancer did come back, I already had an amazing oncologist who was connected to clinical trials and was at a really good hospital that was approved to do clinical trials. So I didn't have to wait. I didn't have to get a second opinion. I didn't have to rush around and try to find a hospital. I was really lucky. And I think one of my biggest recommendations that I always tell patients is to go find the best hospital that you yourself can financially afford to be at. I've now moved to Northern California, and so I'm at Stanford, and that's 4.5 hours away. And it is worth it. I can't even tell you how much it is worth it. There's been so many instances where things could have gone poorly for me, but because I was at an incredible hospital with an incredible doctor, it didn't. So that's one of my just biggest recommendations. And I know I'm privileged. I'm near hospitals. There's a lot of patients where there's not good hospitals near them and they can't afford plane flights. But that's if you can get there, because I was able to be told about this clinical trial. I was really nervous about it because I knew that there was a first generation drug on the market, only one that was approved for stage 4, and it was called Cori, crizotinib, and it didn't work very well in the brain. And I already had brain metastases. And there were a bunch of second generation drugs on the market, but they were only for second line use. So that means after I would have failed Cori. And the research had already come out that if you took those second generation drugs as a first line drug, you receive way more time on it than the first generation drug. But there's always this gap between the knowledge that the doctors know from the conferences and then that actually becoming standard care. So I couldn't get on those second line drugs, even though they knew that that's what I needed. That was what was going to give me more life. That's what was going to treat my brain metastases. So they searched all over and they found a study that they had at the hospital for a very unknown drug called insertinib. And it was a second generation drug, but it was small. It was a very tiny little pharmaceutical company. But they said this is a second generation drug. So far, patients are doing well on it. It will help treat your brain metastases. And I thought it really scared me, but the idea that I could be on a better drug than what was on the market did really appeal to me. And
Absolutely.
that's why I'm still here, is because I was able to get in that clinical trial. And it's worked so well for me. The traditional progression-free survival, the median is 25 months. And I've been on it. It'll be 9 years in June. So yes, and who knows what would have happened if I would have been Cori. I would have had received brain radiation early, and it as Cori traditionally lasts 12 months. So I'm really glad that I did the clinical trial, but it was really hard, and it continues to be very hard. I was there all the time at the hospital. I was there every day in the beginning to take the drug. They would monitor me, take my blood. Then I'd have to come back every week. After that, I had to go get my blood taken every month and then scan every 8 weeks. And I did that for, my gosh, how long did I do that for? 5 years, I think. So I felt like my life revolved around cancer. And it was exhausting. It really was. I was so jealous of seeing other patients being like, oh, my 3-month scans are coming up. I haven't been to the hospital since then. And I thought, I've been there so many times.
Home away from home.
Yes, exactly. And on one hand, I received really great care, right? Because everyone knew me and I was there all the time, being monitored very closely, which is good, checking my heart all the time. But I did feel like my life just completely. So as the trial has gone on, things have changed. Then I started getting my blood done every 8 weeks instead of every 4 weeks. And I started getting scans done every 3 months instead of every 2 months. So it's gotten better with time, but that is something that's very difficult with clinical trials. However, I would say it is still worth it.
Yeah, I know you're not an expert on clinical trials, just on your own, but I'm thinking as people are listening to this, something they might be thinking about is, does this ever become not a trial for you? Is it just continually a trial for you because you were in the trial and it's still working?
Yes, that is such a good question, because that's actually what I'm going through right now. My drug, it took a really long time because, like I said, they're a tiny pharmaceutical company. They were FDA approved in just last year, December 2024. So it took them like years to get FDA approval. And now I'm like, okay, so what happens to me? Because a lot of patients have, like I said, the PFS of it is 25 months. So it's failed. The majority of other patients, I think there's only 2 of us that are still on it in the whole trial of, I think, 200 people. So yeah, what happens to us? Sometimes the pharmaceutical companies will choose to continue to give you the drug for free. And other times they want you to switch over to a prescription program, I think they call it, where basically you're out of the trial. And yes, and then you are just like any other patient. You get the prescription from your doctor and fill it at your pharmacy. And so we are waiting to see what's going to happen with that. And that is a little nerve-wracking. One of the amazing benefits of a clinical trial is that you don't have to pay for your medicine. So I know pays thousands of dollars for their medication. At $2,000, some pay $10,000. More.
I'm charged an obscene amount of money monthly. My husband switched insurance, and the particular company that we're with now only gives $6,000 a month to a specialty drug.
It's horrible. Yeah.
I mean, that's a conversation for another day, right? Like how people, I don't know how, companies and insurance companies don't take into account that it's not just the monthly expense, it's the traveling, it's all of the things. And you feel blessed that we're in a spot where we can figure things out and make it work, the help of copay assistance and different things. But for people that can't, this is a life-saving drug. These are life-saving drugs. So I could understand why that would be a little bit nerve-wracking for you.
Yes.
Fearing what your insurance would cover or not cover and that kind of thing.
Yes, I'm very nervous about it because I live off my Social Security. I am medically retired. I live off Social Security. That's all the money I have. I live in affordable housing. I can't afford thousands of dollars. Because I think the Medicare cap is $2,000. So I don't have that money.
Yeah.
On my Social Security, I make too much money to receive Medi-Cal, right? If you're on Medi-Cal, then you contact the pharmaceutical company, and most of them have programs, and you can say, hey, have money for this, and then they'll give it to you for basically free. Well, I make too much money on my Social Security, but I don't make enough, right? I don't make enough to qualify for food stamps. So I don't make enough to receive different programs, even with the pharmaceutical companies. One thing I know is that my doctor is incredible, and she's very, I'm not sure exactly how to describe her. She's not afraid to say what she thinks and to really advocate for her patients. And so I know that she will say to them, she's been on your trial for 9 years. She's been giving you data for 9 years. She's been driving and flying, all these things, and because it's difficult on patients. So I'm hoping they'll continue to give it to me for free.
I hope so
And then,
too.
yeah, thank you. And then if not, figure it out. But yes, when things change and it becomes FDA approved, and then you're no longer on the trial, there's some nervousness.
Yes. So when you talk about being on this trial, and I know you've relocated amongst all of your journey here, have you had to switch doctors because of the trial, or have you just been able to cut along and make the trips that you need to do?
That was good. That's a good question, because so in the beginning, I was at USC, and this is a small trial. There's not many locations with it. And I was really, when I realized I needed to move home to Reading, and that's where my mom was and my dad, I needed a caregiver. And so knew I could move to Stanford, but moving a hospital made me so nervous because I know my current hospital inside and out. I had been there for many years, and so once I moved, I continued to fly down there every 4 weeks because I had to have blood work done at 4 weeks, and then I had to have scans done at 8 weeks. And I was really lucky that my sister was still living in LA. So I would drive to just a 2.5 hour drive, fly out of Sacramento. It was about an hour and a half flight. And then, land the plane, finally get in an Uber, go to my sister's house. So that's quite a bit of travel. But I was able to stay with her, which was fun, and do the hospital stuff I had to do. But eventually, I that anymore. And so I started interviewing for doctors, and I interviewed Dr. Wakely, and I was just blown away by her. And I liked, but my doctor that I had there was very standard of care, and there's absolutely nothing wrong with that. But it didn't really fit who I am as a patient. I'm more cutting edge, which is probably why I said yes to a clinical trial as a first line therapy, right? That's common to do it as a first line therapy. But yeah, I interviewed Wakely, and I asked her, what is your style? Are you more standard of care? Are you more cutting edge? And she said that standard is very important. However, she does like to push the envelope, and it with appropriate patients. Right? Like if she was the type of patient that wants to be kept up to date on all these things and maybe wants to do other trials. And so I really liked her, and I loved Stanford. And so I eventually did move everything over to Stanford, and it was a bit of a hassle. And now I drive 4.5 hours there.
Yeah.
But
been there.
So what came out of COVID, for me at least, was that with the trial, it became less strict. So I was able to do Zoom appointments with my doctors, and I had to drive 4.5 hours, every. Then I was able to do my scans actually at a different hospital, because it's like that's like 3 or 4 nights stay. If your scans and doctor appointments, and the Stanford area is very expensive to stay the night there. So I scan at UC Davis, which is 2.5 hours away from me. I do my scans, and then I come home. And then a couple of days later, I have my appointment with my doctor from Stanford. And I actually even have a doctor at UC Davis, just in case if I need to receive care there, if I need to do chemo, or if they eventually, they have my trial, but they have other trials. And so, if I wanted to, I could easily switch to Davis. And they used to work, like they know each other. The lung cancer, it's kind of a small community, know each other and have worked together. And so it's worked out really well. And that's made being on the trial a lot easier for me, and switching care and switching doctors. But I was lucky all hospitals have, the same trials. Like Davis doesn't have trials. So I was lucky that Stanford did. So that can be challenging when you're in a trial, is that you have to, sometimes you can't move, and you do have to stay at that hospital.
Right. And, for someone who's in trial as long as you are, a lot can 10 years, in terms of events that would cause you to need to move.
Yes.
Or want to move, like not want that one place. And kudos to you willing to stick with it this long. Although I understand, when it's working, not broke, you don't want to fix it, just keep.
Yeah.
I think it's very interesting, because I think so often we hear people talking about when they fail on a clinical trial. We don't hear the success as much. I've been, if it's 25 minutes, still a success. But, when you get term, benefit is just amazing. So, well, I thank you for sharing that with our viewers. I know this will be enlightening, because there is a lot of discussion about trials and how to find them and where to go and should you do it. So thank you. And just for our viewers, this is the first episode in a 3-part series with Cory. So next episode, we're going to talk a little bit about just anticipatory grief. When you've been on this journey for as long as you have, are you waiting for the other shoe to drop? And what's that feel like? So again, if you are interested, please like and follow, because I think you'll want to see this next episode. I think it's going to be a really interesting discussion. So we look forward to seeing you in episode 2. And thank you, Cory, for being here with me today.
Yeah, you're welcome.